back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
You're lawyers with people who are not in love anymore.
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
Jackson Brown didn't write that for us.
Apparently he did. Welcome to the show. We're talking about family law. We have David Halkett and Sarah Morse from McQuarrieHunterLLP. And where is your office?
We are in Central City in downtown Surrey. Okay. And it's right above SFU, right at the Surrey Central SkyTrain station.
And I always say that you are kind of central for the whole of the Lower Mainland. To the north, you've got the Tri-Cities. To the east, you've got all of the Valley. To the west, you've got Richmond, Burnaby, Vancouver.
Exactly.
The North Shore Mountains. So.
Exactly. And we're like 20 minutes from the U.S. border, too. So we're like right there.
Okay. Now, when you go through a separation and then a divorce, I'm guessing spousal support is a big one. And have you seen any changes, trends in spousal support? We've brought this up in previous shows where more women are getting into law school and medical school, and there's pharmacists. Like there's more professional women making a good living now. And have you seen any change with that?
Well, the majority.
And how does the legal system look at them?
Well, in practice, it should make no difference. Whoever is the higher earning spouse, depending on the roles of the marriage, that's how the spousal support is determined. It's determined like what were the roles of the marriage? Are there any advantages, disadvantages that arose from the breakup or the marriage, etc. So if you were someone who stayed home, doesn't matter if you're the dad or the mom, you stayed home for years, and you took care of the children while the other party developed his or her career, spousal support should be payable. Now, in reality, men tend not to ask for spousal as much as women do.
Why?
Probably societal things that...
Well, how would anybody know?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
People talk, right?
Yes, exactly. I guess that's probably a better way to put it, yeah.
So the person paying will tell all of their communal friends, I'm paying him every month, right?
Well, I always remember the old Joan London, when she was on Good Morning America, she separated, and her husband went to court and got $20,000 of a month spousal support. That was in the late 80s, early 90s.
I was thinking, when was Joan London doing the morning news? It was, that time, right?
And I remember she was making really good coin at that time, if I remember correctly.
Do you know how much Matt Lauer makes a year, by the way? Do you know how much he makes? Take a guess.
30, 40 million?
20 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was making...
I never got that when I did the morning news. I just want to go on record.
and so Joan London was making about $10 million at the time.
Yes.
And I remember when he got his spousal support, because he had been supported by her, she said it's atrocious that the legal system will allow a man to live off his wife. And I think there's still... that grain is still out there. I certainly don't treat my advice any different as to who is coming to see me. If the man has been the one that stayed home and he's given up his career and moved around a lot,
or just makes less.
Yeah, the same factors kick in. A lot of guys simply won't ask for spousal, and a lot of women will simply refuse to even consider paying spousal support.
How can you refuse to pay?
Well, they won't agree to it. They may be imposed on them.
That's two different things.
issue. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So they might not willingly.
Yeah.
But they will have to if
they're ordered. Yes.
Right. Okay. So, Sarah, would you see any trends?
Well, I would say it is coming up less and less because you are seeing either less of a discrepancy between the income. So, I mean, again, we've talked many times on the show about the cost of living in the Lower Mainland. So the reality is that a lot of the clients that we see are double income families who are earning similar wages. So there typically isn't any grounds for spousal support. So that's I would say that's a trend that I'm seeing, is that I don't have spousal support on a lot, not a lot, but there's a fair number of files that don't have spousal support because
everybody's got to work.
Everybody's working. And
one thing to remember as well, Zach, is that child support's paid first, as are the Section 7 extraordinary expenses. So they're factored into who's paying what to the other, and then spousal comes in after. So there may be a discrepancy in income, but once the child support is factored in and paid from, say, dad to mom, just based on difference in income, that equalizes the two incomes to close enough that there's no spousal support payable.
Oh, so that counts towards income.
It does, because the spousal support is based on having similar net disposable incomes between the two parties.
So we hear the stories of, the dad living in a basement apartment eating tomato sandwiches because he's paying child support and spousal support, and he's got nothing.
But
does the court look at that and say, that's not fair?
But that's premised on where the child isn't shared equally. So that changes things. So a lot more now you're seeing, I would say, equal parenting. Both parents have worked and the child has been in daycare and out of school care and things like that. So both parents have the child 50-50. So I think you're seeing less of those scenarios where...
So what you're saying is genders are both working. They're both making similar, not the same maybe, but similar incomes. And when they divorce, they're sharing the load. Not equally at all times, but that's the goal.
Yeah,
I would say that's more of the current trend.
It's rare that you have a situation where the children over, say, 5 years old, where there's not at least a 40% with both parents, and then they argue maybe over the 20% what the schedule is. It's not cut in stone, and every case is different, but usually you're going to have some kind of a shared regime with the parents.
So I guess we're seeing trends in society that the traditional way of one person staying home is not affordable anymore.
It's certainly not in this city. I'm still shocked at how many stay-at-home parents we do have that come in to see me. But remember, the spousal support can also compensate you if you took, say, 5 to 10 years off to raise the children and got back to work, because you would have lost out on promotions, pension.
The trajectory has changed.
Exactly. Right? So you can get spousal support to compensate. Sometimes you can factor that in simply by unequally dividing the assets to some extent to compensate a little bit that way. But that's always a factor. If anyone takes any time off, and that's not just your 1 year mat leave, we're talking about actually staying home with the children, spousal support is often payable in that scenario.
Okay. Do people ever come and have an agreement in place on how they're going to do this?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen more of those, but it's typically those are the younger couples I find that have only been married for a few years. It's relatively amicable. Well, it has to be if they're going to come in with essentially an agreement ready to go. But they come in and they've talked, and it's typically when there's no kids and they sort of know how they're going to divide their assets, because it's usually not a lot. So there's not as much to fight about.
Do you ever get situations where I'm just going to go my way and she's going to go her way, and let's forget this thing ever happened, and they're not going to fight about, like you're saying, if there's no children and there's not much in the way of assets and they're just young and they're starting out in their lives, let's just go our separate ways and forget this ever happened.
Well, to be fair, those aren't the people that come in to see us for the most part. But a small percentage of clients will come in and literally have their separation agreement drafted, and we just sort of go back and forth. Exactly, and that's great. It's showing that they're more concerned with getting some closure and being able to move on with their lives, which is a great place to be. They're lucky.
Yeah, and they come in and there may be issues we can discuss with them that could have been in the agreement, maybe should be. We give the independent legal advice in that regard, and that does happen a lot. People have come up with some agreements subject to getting legal advice. When there's no children, not really a lot of assets, there may be something that should have been divided, but it's not worth the litigation cost, both financial and emotional, to deal with it. So often, we tailor our advice to say, look, you may be able to get more, but it's going to cost you X to do it. It may not be worth it down the road.
As a layperson, my image of spousal support or alimony is that it just is indefinite. You get the divorce, say you had the stay-at-home mom scenario, and now the dad is just going to pay indefinitely. Are there time limits on spousal support?
There are. We have spousal support advisory guidelines, which kind of tell us ranges for time and for quantum, so the amount that's to be paid. Usually it's at least 6 months to a year for every year of the marriage is the range for it. And it depends on whether or not there's child support being paid. That changes the scenario. And computer programs assist us with plugging in the numbers. And
do you ever get clients where you plug all the numbers in and then slide the piece of paper over to them and
yes.
go, ooh.
Yeah, one of them I thought I need to get a defibrillator when I showed them what I was going to have to pay. But it can be indefinite depending on how long the marriage was and the age of the recipient. If the length of the marriage and the age of the recipient equals at least 65, so say a 20-year marriage with a 46-year-old recipient, then it's indefinite maintenance, which means there's no specific end date. If, say, Sarah and I, though, were married for 5 years and we separated, the longest she'd get it would be 5 years, or I'd get it would be 5 years. And as long as at our ages, the way we are now, that wouldn't be. We're not at 65.
So indefinitely means until death or until 65, or?
It can be varied on change in circumstances, such as one party retiring. Mm-hmm. If it's a legitimate retirement for either health reasons or just mandatory retirement. It can change if one of the parties gets remarried. The recipient gets remarried, I should say. Because
why I'm bringing it up is that we talked a bit at the beginning about the gray divorce, the baby boomer divorce. So these are situations where these separation agreements, the spousal support could be for many decades.
It can be theoretically until death. It usually isn't, but the older the people are, so if they're baby boomers or they're gray, and their spousal support payable, there's probably not going to be an end date.
There's a big misconception out there about spousal support and repartnering is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, because I kind of thought that as well, as like, well, when you pay until the person gets remarried, which would make them not want to get remarried to keep the money coming, right? Is that true?
Well, but some people think that it's as soon as they start living with someone else. Yeah. But that's not necessarily the case, depending on what the grounds were for ordering the spousal support. If it was compensatory, then potentially that spouse is going to still be compensated for the time they took out of the workforce. But if it's needs-based, it may be that repartnering someone that makes $500,000 a year, then that need is now gone. So very factually specific. And I've found that that's a very big question out there with a lot of people. There's an assumption that the second that their previous partners with someone else, that they're jumping for joy because their spousal support's ending.
Okay, we'll go to the second marriage, have the kids, and you've got a lot of expenses. Yep. Can you go back to the court and say, listen, I'm paying my first wife this amount of money, and I've got all of these expenses for my new kids. Do you get any compensation for that?
Normally, no, because the court will say first family comes first. In many cases, the order was in existence, and you took on additional obligations when you knew you still had the first set. Just following up with what Sarah had said about ending on repartnering, she's correct in that if your order was based on compensatory, meaning like the person was out of the workforce for years, it doesn't necessarily end on remarriage or another common law situation. The needs-based, which is we're separating, I don't really have a compensatory claim because we worked all together, but I have less income than you and I have a need, that likely can change on a repartner situation.
All right, we'll take a quick break. That's the voice of David Halkett, partner at McQuarrie LLP, and Sarah Morse is here, associate at McQuarrie LLP. We'll talk more about family law next on The Law Show.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.